Hey, welcome back. We are going to do a video. We start doing videos on the miracles of Jesus. And 2 or 3 years ago, President Russell M. Nelson, the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, encouraged us. He does that often, actually, to learn about Jesus, to seek revelation, to learn about his miracles, learn about his ministry, learn about his teaching, learn about his atonement. Always encouraged to learn about this. And I took that to heart. I was like, okay, I'm gonna start with the miracles. I'm gonna section out the miracles and I'm gonna read about each one and study the miracles in depth, and then I'll move on to parables or his ministry or whatever. But I started with miracles, and the plan was to read like one a week and go through it. So I started making a list of his miracles, and then I just Googled it. So like, someone's got to have a list of these, and yeah, there's like millions of lists out there. So most people say Jesus has 37-ish miracles. Um, I think there's far more than that is a miracle, but we won't get into that right now. But so we're looking at the miracles of Jesus. John tells us that the first miracle was Jesus turning water into wine. So I started studying that, and I was going to study it for a week and then move on to the next miracle. But this took forever, and I thought it'd be really easy. Yeah, he turns water into wine. Who cares? What's next? But I think this is extremely important, and every time I study it, it takes longer, and I find more things to study and to write down and to talk about, and it's a lot more in depth than I had planned. So anyway, so we're in John, and I'm going to back up. It's John chapter 2, but we're going to back up at the end of chapter 1. But I don't think when John was writing, he wrote down like John chapter 2, verse 1, and this is what happened. Like that came later, right? He just wrote the story. And if you go to the end of chapter 1, which the verses and chapters were added later, I really like in 51, the last verse of chapter 1, John says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." He's really throwing it down. Like, here we go. We're going to see the Son of God, angels, all this. The angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Immediately says, and the third day there was a marriage in Cana. And that's where we start, with Jesus turning water into wine, which is really cool. It's just far cooler than I thought before. So John, I was writing this a long time later. I believe he's writing this after Revelations. After he wrote Revelations, like this is a while later. Um, I haven't done my own research on this, but I read that there's 7 miracles in John. There's 7 sermons in John, 7 I am statements in John, and I think um, that's important because I think the number 7 is perfection, right? And for John to so many years later to write a book about the life of Jesus and have 7 miracles and 7 sermons and have certain numbers, he's obviously planned out what he's going to say. I'm guessing he's got bajillions of miracles to choose from. So many sermons, so many miracles to choose from, and he picks 7. So the fact that this is one that was chosen in the scriptures, like I said, we have 37-ish listed, just outright miracles, and John picked 7 of them, and this is the first one. This is the first one. So let's see why this would be so important that he does it, and maybe being first, it gets preference over everyone or over other miracles. Um, but I think this is important. Jesus is going to a wedding that we'll see here in a second. But also, I don't believe it was much before this happened. Do we have some of the events in John 1? Jesus was baptized. We also know around that time ish, Jesus fasted for 40 days. So he himself went 40 days, was without food, water. And I don't know how that looked or how that happened. And I don't know if it matters right now, but like he fasted for 40 days. He went out on his own, fasted 40 days. He sacrificed himself, and now he is turning water into wine and freely giving something that he was not able to have for those 40 days, which is cool. And I believe, if I'm doing my math right, about 14%, about 1 in 7 of the miracles deals with food, wine, food, water. That's kind of cool. So let's get into this. John 2, on the third day, there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. The third day, that comes up quite frequently in the Bible, as we know. I think the biggest one is Jesus rose on the third day, but we see the third day come up other times. Jonah didn't come out till the third day. It looks like Jesus is beginning his ministry. He's doing his first miracle on the third day. He was resurrected on the third day. The third day is big in the creation. The third and the sixth day are notable days. I've heard people often get married on the third or sixth day. More people get married on those days because God said it was good or very good. And I think that's kind of cool. But the third day is significant, and it comes up a lot. So I think it's cool that his first miracle is on the third day. Whether that's Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever, I don't know. I'm guessing Tuesday, but I think the symbolism is pretty cool. I think it's cool that Jesus goes to marriages, first of all. Sometimes we think of holy people being someone who sits at church, maybe some priest somewhere dresses up in his robes and sits in a church and reads the Bible and prays all day, which is probably great for that person. But I think that's not what Jesus was doing. So I love that he's out, he's with his disciples, he's going to marriages, he's socializing, he's being with his family. That's really cool. I think marriages were a huge deal back then. Maybe kind of like the sacrament. Like people would fast and pray to prepare themselves for a marriage, which is cool. I read that a funeral would have to give way to a marriage procession because marriages were held in such importance. A marriage, we read about a marriage being like what God has with Israel, and that we could have with God, that we can become one with the Father and with God. Jesus Christ, his marriage with Israel, we read about that. So marriage is, I think, much more important than just two people getting married. I think it's a really big deal. Also back then, these would usually last like several days because people would travel in from like everywhere. They'd travel in from all over, and they'd stay in town forever, or they'd stay in town for several days or weeks. Because you don't get to see your family a lot, you don't travel a lot. But when it's a wedding, they would come together, and sometimes the ceremony would be 1 to 2 weeks. I think it's interesting. Marriages were arranged before a girl was 12 and a half years old. I was reading that a girl at that time would be considered an adult at 12 years old. After 6 months of being an adult, the law starts to change, and that's when marriages would start being arranged before they're 12 and a half. And a lot of times they'd have up to a year to get married after that, which is only like 13 and a half. So it's a lot different than in society today. Now, I have an 11-year-old. As I'm doing this today, my one daughter's 11 and my one's 13. So it's crazy to think about, someone having an arranged marriage in like sixth grade, being married in the seventh grade. Obviously, things were so much different back then. Life expectancy was much different. Everything was much different. So we can't really judge the society by what happens today, but that's what you can expect. And if you watch a YouTube video on the marriage, the couple will probably be like 25 or 30 years old, but they were probably in like junior high. Not that they had junior highs back then, but they were probably about that age. We don't know whose marriage this is. I don't think it was Jesus's marriage. There's some people way smarter and way more spiritual than myself that believe that are certain this was Jesus's marriage. Maybe. I don't think it was, but maybe it was. But I have no idea. And some people are certain about it, so I don't know. But also Jesus, he's like 30 years old, right? When he starts his ministry. So if Jesus had been married, his wedding should have been like a long time ago. Like he's coming up on he's not long from like his 20-year anniversary. He's like his 17, 18-year anniversary right now. If he did get married back 12, 13, 14 or whenever back then. So he would have, if he was married, it would have happened a long time ago. So this being his marriage, it doesn't seem like it. But I've seen some people pretty convinced of that, of different faiths, but I don't know. We just don't have record of that. But I mean, if Jesus got married at 13 and he had kids, I know that's not good to say for a lot of religions, but I'm just saying, like, looking at how old he would have been if he got married at 13, had kids when he was 15, his kids got married at 13 or 15, like he could be a grandpa. He could have grandkids by then with how they did this. Even starting your ministry at 30, he could have had grandkids by then, which is crazy. Not saying he did. But looking at the age, that's about what's going on. I like that Cana is up north, and from what I understand, it's not really close to anything. It's not a big central hub, and I love that his first miracle is in Cana because I think that's how Jesus rolls. Like he's all about the individual. It's not flashy. He's not going to the big cities. He's not going to New York City of the time. Like he's going to a small, quaint wedding in a smaller town. And I really love that. I mean, if you look at his life, that's how he rolls. It does say the mother of Jesus was there. Not really sure what is going on, what her role is. It seems like she has some role of importance at the wedding. Don't know if she's in charge or it's a relative. I don't know. Some people say, or there's tradition that says that this might have been John's wedding, or Mary was an aunt to someone here, which might have made sense why she had that role in the wedding. I have no idea though. So it might have been like Jesus's cousin. I don't know. But I love that he was there. He was doing normal stuff. His mom was working, keep the wedding going. It sounded like she was helping out. And Jesus was with his disciples. He was called. Verse 2. I don't know if I said verse 2. It says, and both Jesus was called and his disciples. to the marriage. So they were all called to the marriage. So I don't know if the marriage had started and then they were called, they ran out of wine and then they were called. If it was a cousin, so they were there anyway. They got a wedding invitation 3 months ago, save the date. I don't know how that worked, but they were there at the wedding. Uh verse 3, and when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith unto him, they have no wine. I I love this so much. First, let's go in order here. They wanted wine. Doesn't say they needed it. They weren't like dying of thirst, like I am. I'm not dying. I just wanted water. They wanted wine. It is necessary for the ceremony, but they had wine. They ran out of wine. Um, which again, they wanted wine and they have no wine. Makes it sound like they ran out of wine. Maybe they didn't have wine to begin with. I don't know. Um, I don't know if that's why the disciples were called, but I think it's important to, it looks like they have no wine and they wanted wine. So to me, seems like there was a ceremony, a feast or whatever. And during this feast, they ran out of wine and people still wanted wine, but they didn't have any. Um, so they might have been out for a little bit. There was none. Um, I think that's important because I really like that because they were done. They were out. They had none. They had nothing left. And I think that's often with our own lives. Miracles we see don't come to the very end until you have nothing left, nothing. And I don't know if this is to help us to learn a lesson, to help us to rely on Him more, to increase our faith on Him. Maybe when we have nothing left in our own lives and we're seeking Jesus, we seek Him more diligently and more strongly. So when we do find Him, we have a greater appreciation and love for Him. Hey, I don't know, but I think that them being completely out of wine is important. They were done. They were lost. They had no hope. They were running on empty. And I can imagine like the family that they were embarrassed, tell everyone that they were out of wine. Um, but I think it's cool. And I also think it's interesting because they ran out of wine and then Jesus is not to give anything away that you might not know, but Jesus turns water into wine. Little spoiler alert, that it's going to happen here in a minute. Um, Jesus could have intervened at any time. He could have intervened like years before. So the family had a bigger farmland, a bigger vineyard, more crops. They could have afforded more wine. Um, their neighbor's crop had more grapes so that their wine was less expensive. Like there's so many times that Christ could have intervened and created a miracle for these people to have wine, but there was no more wine. It was gone. And it was at that time that um, the miracle happened. Even through the night, like, I don't know if they had like a tub of wine that they get wine out of, how that works. Jesus could have made it so that container never ran out of wine throughout the night. He could, the servers, maybe their jugs just didn't run out. Maybe the cups just never ran out. Fed the thousands with fishes and loaves that it's hard to understand what happened, but it sounds like they just, everyone took some fish and they passed it on. There was more fish and more fish, and there was just more and more and more. Um, so I don't know how it worked out exactly, but Jesus could have done so many more miracles, but he waited until there was nothing left. And I think appreciating God's timetable on some of the miracles is huge. there was nothing left. And I think that's important because so many times in life we have nothing left. We're done. We're at the end. We have nothing to give, nothing to do. Like we are done. And that's when we turn to Jesus, and that's when the miracles happen, people. That's when it happens. Um, so many times in my life, I think like I lost my keys. I got to go to work, and I'll say a little prayer. I'll be like, boom, that's where my keys are, and I'll go get my keys. And I think, well, why? Obviously, God is helping me find my keys, or He's having me reach out to a friend that's in trouble, and like that communication might be miraculous and a response to that person's prayer, or He has me drive a different way to work, or like so many times I feel like God intervenes in my life and other lives. Or a song comes on the radio, like something small, like a song coming on the radio. You're like, Heavenly Father, I really need help in this situation. A song comes on the radio that's like an answer to your prayers. I don't know if that's ever happened. So many times, like these things are miracles. And then so many times there's like things in life where um I feel like Jesus is answering these little things, but also like there's so many times in the scriptures. I'm looking at Luke 5, Luke 19, Matthew 12, Matthew 15, Mark 8, where the disciples are following Jesus and they've gone so long without food that they're on the verge of fainting. Like it's crazy that they are with Jesus Christ. They're with him in his ministry. They're walking around with him. And sometimes we read that they've gone days without food and they're about to faint. Um, Other times, the disciples' nets were so full of fish that they needed help pulling it all in. Like they couldn't haul it in themselves because their blessings were so bounteous. Um, it's just crazy the contrast. Um, but he always answers our prayers. And sometimes life will take us till we're on empty. And then we reach out, and that's when the miracles happen. And I think if the miracles always happened really early on, then we might not appreciate Christ's involvement in our life as much. um, Hold on a second. Gotta make sure. Um, and we're in 3, they have no wine. I like that Mary didn't ask for anything specific. Mary told Jesus they're out of wine. She said that and left it there. I cannot imagine what events were in the life of Mary. I can't even imagine what she's lived through these last 31 years since the angel appeared to her and she learned she was going to have a baby. I can't even imagine what living with Jesus those first 30 years, because he wasn't ministering, like he wasn't out, like she was raising him. She had that time with him, and that is crazy to think about. Like her understanding of who Jesus is, in my opinion, is not matched by anyone else who's on the planet, who has been. She never asked Jesus to do anything directly, which I think is important. So she just says, they don't have wine. And that's it. If it was me, I'd be like, Jesus, will you have one of my neighbors bring some wine over? Will you have a sale on it next door so I can afford it? Can you, I don't know, like something, you know? But Mary didn't give an answer. She didn't give what she wanted Jesus to do. She just said, they have no wine. In verse 4, and Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. The term woman is said out of huge respect, and I read that is a beautiful way to address your mom. I know here's some people nowadays that don't have the understanding. They'll be like, why was Jesus mean to his mom? And I've heard that a lot. And I think that if you read something and think Jesus is being rude to his mom, I think you should look at your own understanding first before thinking Jesus is rude to his mom. Think if we think that, then we should look at our own belief because our own belief is out of whack somewhere. And instead of thinking Jesus is rude, we probably think like, I should read more up. I should read on that term. I should read and understand what that means, what Jesus was saying, because clearly I am not understanding something. Not Jesus was in the wrong. Because Jesus was perfect. And if you think he was being rude, then um, it's probably time to gain some more understanding on your end on how things work. John 19:26, when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple standing by whom he loved, I love that he says that. He saith unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. So Jesus uses that term again um, to call her woman, very respectful. I love it. Um, I also like that he says, my hour is not yet come. So he's like, I'm not starting my public ministry yet. I don't know if he's talking about his ministry. I don't know if he's talking about like, I don't know what he's talking about exactly, but it's speaking of the resurrection or it's not time to do miracles yet. It's not time for people to see me doing miracles in public. I don't know. But it almost sounds like it might have been rhetorical because we do not have an answer from Mary. And I think also if we think, well, that was rude of Mary to not answer, I think we should also look at our own understanding of how things work and language back then, and mostly look at how we are wrong if we think of something. Because if you find fault with Mary or Jesus, then you need to do some searching to why you are wrong, because you are. Um, this is my favorite. This is getting good. Um, verse 5, John 2 still. His mother saith unto the servants. So after that, Mary turns to the servants at the wedding and says, Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it. Whatever he says, do it. This is 2,000 years before Nike, and Mary's dropping down. Whatever Jesus tells you to do, you do it. Oh, yeah, there's Jesus right there. Whatever Jesus tells you to do, you do it. I love that. What is the best advice ever? That's the best verse ever. I mean, there's a lot of good ones. But if Jesus tells you to do something, you should do it. And I like that she says, whatsoever. Again, Mary has more knowledge about Jesus than anyone. And she tells Jesus that there's a problem. And then she tells the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. Mary doesn't know. Mary doesn't even offer suggestions about what Jesus should do. She doesn't know. And she's learned in her life, I believe, she's learned that Jesus is going to do something that she does not plan. The miracle is going to come in some fashion that she doesn't understand, she doesn't know. Um, she just leaves it to Jesus. Whatever he saith unto you, do it. And that's the other thing. So she knows A, that Jesus is going to help. B, he's going to tell them to do something. She has no idea what. Maybe she does, but it doesn't sound like it. Whatever Jesus says, do it. And I think our prayers would probably be improved with a little more of that type of feeling, like, whatever you tell me to do, Jesus, I'll do it. Whatever it is, I don't care. Here's a problem. whatever you tell me to do, I will do it. Mary, she's the first disciple. She's the bomb. I read that this is the last word that we have from Mary, the last speaking phrase or whatever. I don't know if that's true. Maybe. Um, I don't know. We've got the Book of Mary even and other stuff, but whether it is or not, um, I think it's super important. Like, do it. Whatever Jesus tells you to do, do it. And it may have been Jesus's desire too to do it, but I think it's huge. And it looks like the servants were obedient to Mary, whether she was an important figure, or they were her servants. I don't know, but the servants did what Jesus asked. And it doesn't sound like the servants probably knew who Jesus was. Maybe they did, but it doesn't seem like it was publicly known. But they were trusting in Mary. Maybe as servants, they didn't have a choice. They were just going to do whatever he said. But they listened to Jesus, um, and they did what she told them to, and then they did what Jesus said. Um, Again, whatever he says. And that's the key. I think so many times that we have prayers, they're answered like, I need this to happen. And you're like, oh, we'll make dinner for your neighbor. And you're like, well, that doesn't answer my prayer. Like, I need this. And you might get a prompting to go make dinner for your neighbor or something like that. And then when you do what Jesus says, something happens that you could not foresee at the time. And it solves the problem or makes the problem better, or you never know. That's why miracles are crazy. I love that she says, do it. Do it. Whatever he says, do it. Fantastic advice. Okay, verse 6. And this is probably going to be the longest video of the whole time. So it's okay. Because we won't be able to spend this much time on the other miracle videos. Anyway, verse 6. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone after the manner of purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. Firkins. I like that word. I think we should go back to using firkins. Whatever a firkin is, like we should use it. So we have 6 water pots of stone. So these are pretty big. Now I have 2 to 3 firkins apiece. Looks like would be about 20 to 30 gallons. And I've got like a blue water storage 30-gallon tank. And that thing is heavy. Like I can move it just because I'm incredibly strong and handsome and humble. No, the only way I can move it is if I like put it on a side and like roll it. Like it is so heavy. And these are stone. So I don't think they're moving. But like if you've seen one of those, not the big 55-gallon or whatever blue thing, but like a smaller, pretty big water thing. I think that's 30 gallons. So each of these stone pots would be 20 to 30 gallons, which puts you up to 120 to 180 gallons total. It uses 150-ish for math purposes. But looking at that amount, this is enough to fill about 4 modern-day bathtubs up to the brim. It is a ton of water. Not literally close. It's a lot. It's a lot of water. Probably more around half a ton, 3/4 of a ton, 1,000 to 16,000 pounds of water, which is so much water. So we got 150-ish gallons of water. A bottle of wine today takes about 5 of those to be in a gallon. If you had a bottle of wine today that was $7.50, the value of the wine that's about to be created will put you up $5,000-6,000 depending on the amount of wine. If it was more expensive wine, it was like a $30 bottle today. Each gallon would cost about $150, and there's 150 gallons, so you're up pushing like $30,000 worth of wine. So there's a lot of wine. Um, this should have been way enough for even a huge wedding party. And it sounds like this might not have been a huge wedding party because it was out in the boonies, but I don't know. Maybe it was big. But it sounds like they also had wine throughout the night. And then we ran out. So then we have tons of wine, tons and tons of wine um, created somehow. The stone pots, I read that they were clay pots, and um, they were stone, not clay pots, because the clay, I believe, was not allowed for purification. The water in the pots was set apart for purification. It was cleaning water, not drinking water. That the clay would absorb some impurities from the water. Um, Mosaic law said that the stone pots were to be used because they would not absorb anything from the water. It would keep the water intact. Um, the water in cleaning pots, or the purification pots, was already cleaned and consecrated or set apart for cleaning. People would come travel a long way and then use this water to wash. I don't know how that worked. I don't know if you like wash in each six pot and you get cleaner as you go along, or six guests can wash at the same time. I don't know how that works. But it's cool. And I think about it like anything with Jesus and water. I think of for Jesus and blood. I think about the sacrament. And when we take the water or wine into us, we remember Jesus. And I think this is huge, that when we take the sacrament, we are also purified. These were purifying pots. When we take the sacraments, the water or the wine, we take that and it cleanses us, just like these pots does. We become cleaner in front of Christ, and we kind of renew our commitment to Him. Jesus, we read down the road that Jesus took that bitter cup for us, and He took that bitter cup and suffered and died and gave us the good cup, which is the sacrament to remember Him by. Um, Jesus sweat blood from every pore, we read. Um, Christ's blood was clean, perfectly clean, and was Him spilling that clean blood allows us to be clean as well. And I'm not sure exactly how that all that works, but I feel like I could testify that that's true. Um, Christ's blood, Christ's blood from a sacrament is taken into our bodies, the wine or the water, and it becomes part of our own blood. And we become one with Him through the sacrament, which is really cool. Um, the work to fill up that many water pots has got to be a ton of work. So I don't think they had a hose, or I don't know. I don't think they had a hose or something. I think they had to take a container, go to another container or something, fountain, or I don't know, where they got it from a river, and then they had to like come back and then pour the water in and go get more. Even if they had like 5 people with gallon containers, like it would have been 30 trips back and forth. This is a ton of work. This is a ton of work to fill these big containers up with water. Now remember, they don't need water. They need wine. No water. They're being obedient. They're filling these big things up with water because they were told to. But I think the lesson there is invaluable because they're filling up these containers of water, having no idea that they're about to turn into wine. Like when Christ asks us to do something, you feel the Spirit prompting you to do something. Almost never you're like, I should do this because this person's having a hard day, or this person, whatever, like whatever we feel that we should do. We don't know why. These people are doing so much work to fill up these pots of water. It is crazy, a ton of work. And again, if that was me, I'd be kind of angry. I'm like, why am I filling up all these water things? No one needs to be purified. Everyone's here already. No one wants water to drink. We're not drinking out of these things. Like, you know, I, I'd be kind of angry. And I would have been angry the whole time I was doing it until I saw the miracle happen here. I like that there was 6 pots. Um, 'Cause six is often looked at as like a unholy or a satanic even. It's like the worst number is six because seven is like the perfect number. And six is just short of seven. So we have these 6 pots, which is a bad number, but then Jesus combines with that, Jesus being the seventh one. Some people look at this as like Jesus being the seventh, which is perfection. Um, I don't know, kind of cool to think about that. But he made something, if six is a bad number or satanic or whatever, Jesus takes that and changes it into something perfect and pure and very valuable. And it wasn't before. And that's what Jesus does with us. That's what he does with our lives. Seven, Jesus saith unto them. So we had Mary, she's like, whatever he says, do it. All right. Jesus saith unto them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them to the brim. Filled them to the brim. So they filled the water pots, and not only did they not whine about it, they didn't fill them up close to the top. They filled them up to the top. Perfect obedience. Perfect obedience to what Jesus asked them to do. I love that. I also love he used the water pot sitting there. He used what was in the house. He didn't send them next door to find wine or whatever. Like he used what was there. It's like he's like, let's use those. Let's use those water pots over there. Let's do a miracle with those ones. And I love that because he uses the miracle with whatever we have in our lives, whatever we are. That's what he uses and can do the miracle with. If you look at Jesus' miracles, we've got him doing miracles with bushes, rivers, clouds, the elements, healing. Like he uses what's there, rocks, whatever. Like he uses what's there. He uses what we have, and he creates something amazing out of it. I love that they filled it to the brim. I think it's cool they mentioned that. They filled it to the brim all the way. Um, Filling that to the brim gave them like the maximum benefit possible, the maximum blessing possible. I like that they were 100% obedient. I love that. Um, I like the quantity that they worked so hard. They filled it to the brim. All this time, there's still no wine. I don't know how long it took them to fill those 150 gallons. However long it was, they did not have wine still. They were still out, and people were still wanting wine, and they didn't have any. Who knows how long that was? And sometimes the timing is is interesting because sometimes not only will we be on empty, we might be on empty for a while. I don't know how long they were out of wine for before Jesus brought the solution. Lazarus was dead for a while, which is crazy. Jesus didn't save him like before he died, or 2 minutes after he died, or an hour after he died. There was a timetable there, and that's when the miracle comes, which is really hard if you're in that situation waiting for that miracle. Um, but the obedience comes from the action. And we talked about Mary saying, do it. Um, when Mary says, whatever he says to you, do it. So first you have to listen. Like you have to listen and then have action. And whatever it is, you have to act upon. Um, Someone noted that filling the pots to the brim, never allows Jesus to like sneak anything into it, or it's not like a trick or anything. I don't know what he would have. It's not like, and they diluted wine back then. I don't know if it's in my notes, but I read that like the first wine you'd get might be like a 1-3 or a 1-5 ratio, like wine to water. It was mostly watered down. Later in the night, you get like a 1-10 ratio. So you'd get a lot less. So if the servants filled the pots up like 80%, Jesus could maybe sneak some real wine in there and people probably wouldn't have noticed. They're filled to the brim. So no real wine could have been added. Again, this was a ton. I've read that this is probably enough. This much wine could have lasted in like the whole year, which is crazy. Sorry, I'm just going through. I love this. Okay, we're gonna go. I know. I love the faith. I love the faith that they take action that makes no sense to them because Jesus told them to do it. Huge. Okay, verse 8. And he saith unto them, so Jesus is talking to them. So they've filled them up to the brim. And they're like, all right, we did our part. What next? And he saith unto them, draw out now and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bear it. So they're still listening to Jesus and they're still doing exactly what he says. Now, we don't know when the water turned into wine. We don't know if when they poured the water into the stone pot, if it turned to wine at that time. We don't know if it was when it got scooped up. We don't know if it was when the servant was carrying the lamb skin, whatever. I don't know how that works. We don't know if it was when it got poured into the cup. I don't know when it got changed to wine. At some point in this night, after it was filled up with water, when it got to the governor's cup, sometime in that period, the water turned into wine, which is crazy. We don't know how, no idea how, but it was turned into wine. And it must have been crazy for the servant. Like they scoop up water. They spend a half an hour filling up stone pots with water. They scoop up the water, and Jesus tells them to like give it to the governor. And they're probably like, sure, because it's water. And I can only imagine like, think of how that must have been for that servant to be like pouring that water. And I don't know if he saw wine come out. I don't know if the governor got it and drank. But at some point, that miracle happened. Some point in there, the creator of the world, the one who changed the elements to create the world, changed the elements in that water to become wine. Somehow, on that cellular atomic level, the creator of the world changed water into wine. I have no idea how. I don't know how he does any of his miracles, but I know that they happened. I love the very simple instructions. I think usually when we are prompted to do something by the Spirit, it is very simple. And we also don't receive any explanation. Oh, it would have been nice for the servant, like, could have told me it was going to turn into wine. I was just pouring water in there. I was so nervous. But he was obedient and did it. And I like that Jesus never lays out the whole plan, right? They didn't receive the second part until they were finished with the first, and they didn't receive the third until they were finished with the second. Like it all went in order, and they filled up the pots full of water, and they didn't know the next step until that was done. Um, I just think like times in my own life when I felt prompted to do things and I don't always do them. What if the servants had filled the pots up like halfway? If they had filled them up 90%, would they have turned to wine? I I don't know. Like how many miracles, how many huge miracles in our life do we miss out on because we are not 100% obedient like these guys? I like that the servants were probably the first ones to see the miracle, to see what happened. Governor, the important people at the wedding, they might not have never known what happened. Maybe they heard about it later or they read it in the newspaper or something. Maybe I don't know how that works. But for now, they don't know how this happened. They just know that they have wine now and that's it. And I can only imagine the servants like, what is going on? And they're like back in the break room, like, dude, did you see what happened? Like, and that must have been the most crazy thing um, to see. And it wasn't around the governor, and it wasn't around the important people. It was the servants that were doing the work that saw that miracle. Others benefited from the miracle, but the wine they drank was just they were just drinking wine. The servants, I feel like, were the ones that saw the miracle happen, and their lives were changed. Um, just far more valuable than a glass of wine or a whole bunch of glasses of wine because they had a lot. um, okay, we're gonna go to verse 9. I do like the servants were 100% obedient, but sometimes us as servants we are not 100% obedient to Jesus, which is tough, and it's it's tough. But I also like the elements, the water. When Jesus created the world, turned water into wine. In any of these stories, parting the Red Sea, whatever it is, the elements are always 100% obedient to their creator. 100%. Always. It's us servants that are like smarter that aren't always obedient. Gosh. Okay. Verse 9. We're getting there, guys. Almost done. We'll wrap this up. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine and knew not whence it was, so they just got some wine. They didn't know where. But the servants which drew the water knew. The governor of the feast called the bridegroom. So I think this isn't a huge deal in the big scheme of things. A little marriage ceremony happening in out far away from big Jerusalem. If they ran out of wine, it's not a huge thing. Um, the wedding and people having enough wine. Um, but the miracle is huge, and Christ intervening in our lives, even if we are small and we don't feel like we're as important. Um, I don't know. He will intervene in our lives, and if we don't feel we are worthy of Him intervening in our lives, it's because you're listening to the wrong voice. Yeah. Um, I like how he says, um, the ruler tasted the water, which was made wine, and the servant drew the water up. So yeah, so it looks like they in their whatever serving thing they pulled water up, um, and then they served it. So it was water, um, and the servants knew which drew the water, but the ruler did not know. In verse 10, so the governor called the bridegroom, saith unto him, every man at the beginning that set forth good wine, like we said, it's not as diluted. It's like 1 to 3 at the beginning and like 1 to 10 later on. It's way more diluted at the end of the night. And continue here. And when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now. It's like, you dog, you kept the good stuff till the end, not like everybody else. Like, this is awesome. Um, I really like that. I like that he told the bridegroom. We don't know if he said it to everybody and everybody heard it, or he just. But it sounds like he was talking to the bridegroom. I don't know if he announced it for everyone to hear. The governor was amazed that they saved the really good stuff um, till the end. I like, and again, like sometimes we're on empty, and that really good stuff comes later. And I don't know if Jesus could also be the good wine in our lives. If this is a kind of announcing that he's finally coming out, like the good wine finally came out at the end. Jesus is finally coming out. Jesus is going to start his mission. The best doesn't come early; it comes at the right time. Um, the good wine, they say the good wine until now, which, depending on how you look at it, kind of makes it sound like the wine they had before wasn't as good as this wine. This is really good wine. So it sounds like this is the good stuff. But they saved it till the end, and the governor was all excited about this. Um, but in a few, not too many years, Jesus is going to suffer and die, and it's not just the people at the wedding that receive these miracles. It can be all of us. Jesus not only created wine on the spot, but it sounds like he aged it perfect. If you make wine, it takes some time to ferment, right? It takes some time to get to that like perfect perfect state that you want to drink. You're not going to drink it like day one. Um, it might take 1 to 3 weeks to make wine. It's going to sit, could be 6 months in the bottle or longer. Like it could be a long time, which makes it even cooler that he did it in an instant. Like making wine is a long process, not for Jesus. Um, that's cool. We can also look at some others symbolism. When Moses was bringing the plagues down on Pharaoh, the first one was turning water into blood. If God can change water into wine or into blood, he can definitely change our circumstances, our actions, ourselves, and change our lives and create miracles around us. Wine and blood are used together symbolically. So maybe this was Jesus's announcement that he was on earth as a man now and he was coming out and that he was going to shed his own blood. Again, looking at sacrament with the wine and the blood are referred to together symbolically. So maybe turning that, maybe there's some symbolisms there with blood and kind of foreshadowing what he was going to do with us. And in 11 here, I'll wrap this up. The beginning of miracles this beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee and manifest forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. Like this was it. This was the first one. And his disciples believed on him because of it. It says the beginning of miracles. Personally, I think we'll have another video on this, but I think there were a lot of miracles for this before he was born. After he was born, though we don't always count as miracles. But this was the first one. This is when he came out, and his disciples believed on him. His disciples saw miracles when they were getting recruited. There's a lot of miracles. I think in my own life, I've seen so many miracles, and this was the beginning of for John what he saw. Maybe it was the beginning of miracles for Jesus's ministry, beginning of miracles in Galilee or Cana. But it does sound like I feel like there was a lot of miracles before this, especially if you're Mary. Who knows what she saw, but I'm sure she saw a lot. in a couple chapters, we get the second miracle of Jesus that John gives us. Um, but I think why was turning water into wine his his miracle? Why was it the first one? Um, like we talked about Christ creating the world. First John talks about that. The first chapter of John talks about that. I think that's a pretty big miracle. I think a lot of stuff happens, but I think turning water into wine was a huge thing. I don't know if it was the power over the elements, power over time, if it was because it was a sacred event with sacrament, um, a wedding, the wedding event, if that was huge, if it was a symbolism. Um, I don't know. I mean, he did so many more miracles after this, and this was the start. And I think it was symbolic. Um, and I love it. And I love that it was a small crowd. No one was healed. No one was raised from the dead. Sins weren't forgiven. Withered arms weren't made whole. Um, Maybe you're starting off in a smaller setting. Maybe it was something for his mom. Um, Maybe it was a symbolism. Maybe it was him taking a step from more human to a more godly, showing people that he is. He does have that God in him. You know, I don't know. Did he use wine because it was so important to their society, important for the sacrament, important to the wedding? Um, Maybe if he did this, like no one no one would doubt it. Maybe he's taking baby steps and doing bigger miracles. So by the time that he is resurrected, people believe it because they expect miracles and they don't doubt anything that is coming from him. For me, Jesus turns ordinary water into something very special and very valuable, um, and a ton of it. And I think it doesn't matter what the matter was doing before. In that instant of Jesus intervening, it became a new element, something totally new. Yeah, part of the water was still there, um, I guess, but now there was so much good mixed with the water. In that instant, it all changed. Yes, water can keep people alive, but the wine at the wedding seemed to really have improved the situation. Jesus improves the situations in our lives, but also improves us. Of the countless comparisons we can make with his miracle and our own lives, the one I would like to focus on is that he can change anything. Anything. He has all power and wants nothing more to change you from something good to something great. He wants to change you from water, which is really good, to wine, which has so much value. Water is one of the most abundant things in the world, covers two-thirds of our Earth's surface. Wine is one of the most valuable and relatively rare liquids. And only Christ could change our lives from gross seawater to being something of so much value. Um, Mary said, "Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it." Um, I think that's the most tremendous thing we can take from this. I think that's the most tremendous thing we can take from any miracle or any of our studies. Look at the miracles that happened at this time because they listened to Jesus. Jesus is communicating with us. His Holy Spirit is communicating with us. The more that we try to align our own lives and have those experiences with Jesus, not like Mary had, but on a much lower level, we will also grow um, and level up like Mary did, and we'll understand his miracles. And the biggest thing I can take away from this is whatever Jesus says unto you, whatever it is, no matter how little it makes sense, and it never will, you'll never know the outcome, whatever it is, whatever he saith unto you, do it.